And we are off. We got another edition of the Quad Squad game, is what I call it. And by quad, I mean quadrants. So as you can see, I have divided the page into 4 quadrants, and I am quickly rendering on top of 4 basic shapes that I placed within each quadrant. Now I'm calling this one the alien cats. When I started off, I didn't really have an agenda, but clearly I just started freestyling, and then what happened was alien cats emerged. So, diving in. So if you look here, essentially I'm taking that basic shape, which in that first box was basically an oval, and I start adding features, the eyes and the hair, and then I quickly move over to the next box, that sort of square. And at some point I decided that I was going to alternate the boxes, or should I say the quadrants. Let's stay consistent with the game. And I was going to alternate. I was going to do sort of a 3/4 view, a front view, 3/4 view, front view. So just kind of to make it interesting, so that way it's not all the same consistent shape in each box. And in terms of tools, all I'm using is, in this particular case, I'm just using the technical pen, which I've altered, and I've actually shown the settings for in a previous video. And so that's really all it is, technical pen. I vary the size. I should also mention that I'm working in Procreate. So I vary the size with the little slider that I place on the left-hand side. The top slider is the size, the one on the bottom is the opacity of the brush. And so I just play around with the size of that. I find sort of a middle ground, basically so I can make the thickest lines and the thinnest lines with one brush. And that's how I'm able to kind of quickly pass through these and render. So I chose to do this one, do all the line art first. So I just kind of went from quadrant to quadrant to quadrant, doing the line art rendering. And then in the end, I'm going to add a bit of shading and a bit of highlight. And I think I even play around with the background color at some point at the very end of the video. You will see that. There's nothing magical about it. It's just I was like, what would it be like if I changed the contrast? I like rendering in this almost sort of monochromatic way. There's something fun to me about literally just adding either just a highlight, because the midground is already taken care of by the background color, or adding a highlight and a shadow to this already dark line that I applied. Also notice that I am rendering in not pure black, the line art, which is great. One thing that's great about Procreate, you can use pretty much any color you want. You can mix them, so you can literally make any kind of color under the rainbow. But I liked rendering this in a sort of a brown line, which I thought kind of made it look pretty interesting. I could have gone black, but just for fun I chose to make it brown because I can. There I was just kind of playing around with the background color. You can see the character in this last quadrant, this sort of fourth one just below the first. As you can see, I'm not happy with that particular character. And so the beauty of working digitally is that if I don't like it, I can just kind of go back in time basically and sort of undo. And in Procreate, undo is just your two fingers, and you just double tap the screen, and it will go back a step in your actions. And so it's really helpful to render digitally in that manner. And if you want to bring back, if you went too far in your undos, you just triple finger tap, double tap, triple finger, bang bang, and that will bring it back a step. It's kind of like the Marty McFly of Procreate. You can kind of go back and forth in time. So here I'm at the point now where I've kind of settled on a character that I like, right? And then I'm making little slight adjustments to the line art. You can see kind of I go in. I mean, for me, inking is it's really a combination of the ink brush you choose, which for me is the technical pen, which I've altered, and also the eraser tool, which I use the studio pen, and I've altered that as well, and I've made that a bit thicker. Here I've just literally went in on a separate layer and filled in those shapes. In this case, I made a reference layer out of the line art, and then put a layer underneath it that was the color layer. And then within that color layer, I just literally dragged that brownish tone that I created into the open spaces. For example, the character in the upper left, he has this vast open space in the center of the rendering, and I just literally dragged the color right in there, and it just filled the entire layer, kind of like a paint bucket tool in Photoshop. I think I refer to it as color picker or something else, but I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was called the paint bucket tool in Photoshop, where you can literally just drag color into completely filled in shapes. So line art shapes, I should say. So it's on its own layer, and then obviously I created a clipping mask layer on top of that lighter brown. I created a clipping path layer, excuse me, and it basically masks in all that rendering, all that sort of shadow render. It masks it in within the shape of the line art. It's contained in there, so you can't render beyond the lines. So imagine if you were a kid and you were, your teacher would tell you color within the lines. It's like it literally forces you to color within the lines. At this point, I'm sort of playing around with different shadow colors. And then, of course, one of the best parts of any illustration is adding the highlight. It, to me, is what makes these things sing and makes them pop. My style tends to be a bit graphic, harsh, hard line, almost like cell animation style rendering. And so for me, particularly if I'm working monochromatically, particularly in this one where the tones are very similar, it's not like we have these deep, contrasty blacks versus whites. It's really this sort of, I'm playing around in the kind of the mid-range. And if that's the case, you definitely need to bring some highlight in. And ideally some deep darks to kind of create that balance, that contrast. As you can see at this point, it's clearly, I'm just about there. I'm really at the final stage. It's just, I lighten the background a touch just to create that contrast. I was suggesting because I felt it was just a touch too much of the same tone. And then I add this outer outline. The rationale behind that is, imagine if this was a printed on a t-shirt or it was a sticker. If you applied these on almost any background, having that outer white outline would allow it to stand out regardless of the background color. And this outline is white, so it's on its own layer. It's underneath, it's between the background and the artwork. And I use what was the pen I use for that? I think it's fine tip pen, which I like because it makes a nice consistent line. And I just outline everything. You can see me there kind of playing around with the background, but eventually I wind up back with the orange. So that's that. Quad Squad game. The rules are in previous videos. Please follow along. sketchyGOichie. Live your moment. Happy sketching, y'all. Peace.